Just about every country and every culture on Earth has at least one visionary plant that they use, or that some of them use, for altering consciousness. Basically, I see psychedelics as spiritual tools.
These psychedelic tools, I mean, they're really only tools. I see them that way. I don't see them as something that makes you good or makes you brilliantly intelligent or makes you right. They're just tools, and we have a lot of work to do to be better at being human beings, and they're one of the tools that we have, or they're an array of tools that we have to be able to do that. But part of the work is cultural. We need to introduce our young people to the concept that this is good work and scary work and rewarding work, and give them, preparation, initiation for the principles of what collective seeking, individual seeking, going, the thing that young people do, which is to go off to the edge and experiment. I mean, that's also part of it, but we push them there and we don't inform them. They're underinformed. So then it makes it so much harder to bring all the people in to do the good work that we could if we were a tradition where this was alive and respected. So part of our work is to learn again to respect these medicines.
They are very good tools for anyone who's on any kind of spiritual journey, whatever that means, and it means different things to different people. And psychotherapy can be a part of that. I mean, people who go into psychotherapy are on a spiritual quest, whether they call it that or not.
Anyone who has actually been around people using psychedelics know they have tremendous therapeutic potential, tremendous potential to launch people into confrontations with aspects of their personality or their history that they are in denial of. The people who hold that these psychedelic substances have no application have very little actual personal experience with them. Drugs is a word which has polluted the well of language. Part of the reason we have a drug problem is because we don't have an intelligent language to talk about substances, plants, psychedelic states of mind, sedative states of mind, states of amphetamine excitation. We can't make sense of the problem and the opportunities offered by substances unless we clean up our language. Drugs is a word that's been used by governments to make it impossible to think creatively about the problem of substances and abuse and availability and so forth and so on. Drugs mean that which cures us and the greatest social problem of the generation. So there, right there, you see the schizophrenia involved in thinking about drugs. Apparently there are good drugs sanctioned by science and medicine, and bad drugs used by brown people in strange rites and growing in unusual plants in distant parts of the world. This kind of thinking, because it's naive, leads, of course, to social problems and bad politics and bad social policy.
Well, now, this is a very interesting subject. I mean, in this book that you mentioned, this book of mine, Brave New World, I postulated a substance called soma, which was a very versatile drug. It would make people feel happy in small doses. It would make them see visions in medium doses, and it would send them to sleep in large doses. Well, I don't think such a drug exists now, nor do I think it will ever exist, but we do have drugs which will do some of these things, and I think it's quite on the cards that we may have drugs which will profoundly change our mental states without doing us any harm. I mean, this is the pharmacological revolution which has taken place.
From the time I was very young, I was fascinated with the idea of extremely dramatic changes in consciousness from which one recovers after a few hours, induced by plants. And I discovered through the writing of Aldous Huxley and other people that this was a worldwide religious and cultural phenomenon that my own Catholic middle-class upbringing had completely overlooked and denied. And I've been fascinated with it ever since.
There's something at its core that has to do with the core of ethical and moral behavior, about the sense of interconnectedness of all people and things. At its heart, we're talking about altruism in its purest sense. We're talking about love and caretaking for other people and for the environment. And we have the opportunity to study that. I can't imagine anything more important than that.
Within 20 to 30 minutes, you begin to feel energy flowing through your skin.
You begin to smell the music.
Ecstasy and fun and laughter and deeper vision and compassion.
A collapse of time and space.
You can see much more connectedness between everything.
What looks like a duality, which is the rug versus the wall, is really a continuum of rug wall. And rug wall ceiling, and rug wall ceiling people, and rug wall ceiling people, fruit, music.
In a flash, that experience of the other, of the divine.
It's opening your eyes onto a vast horizon that you had no idea ever even existed.
What they're really doing is applying a lens to the brain, a kind of internal lens, if you like, rather than, let's not think of an external instrument, let's think of an internal instrument. Perhaps that's what hallucinogens are. They're applying a lens to the brain to enable us to see more of reality than we can see with our everyday senses, just as a microscope or a telescope enable us to see more of reality than we see with our everyday senses. So I think that if our society was not so rigidly stuck in the materialistic framework, then we would be welcoming the opportunity to do wide-ranging research into the mysterious nature of reality, using these incredible agents for altering consciousness.
Psychedelics have been playing a part in religious, mystical experiences since the beginning of time. They are a powerful way for human beings to blow their little egos out of the water and contact the divine.
I mean, one thing, the whole of spirituality has its roots, ancient roots, in the shamanic traditions. We still have those traditions, and a huge number of them are based on whatever the indigenous psychedelic happens to be in that area. Because what could be more natural than you pick up a mushroom or something like that, you ingest it, and my God, you're having visions. You're seeing life in a new way. You're seeing through the appearances. You have a greater understanding, or at least the confines of your common sense understanding is exploded.
36 people were on what many say was a life-changing trip, but none of them ever left a university laboratory. They volunteered to take the psychedelic ingredient that puts the so-called magic in certain kinds of mushrooms. And now there's a surprising follow-up. CNN's Carol Costello joins us live with the results. Carol, what's happening now?
Well, John, maybe the hippies of the 60s weren't just on something. Maybe they were onto something. Scientists at Johns Hopkins now say magic mushrooms really can expand your mind, producing a kind of religious experience. 14 months ago, they gave dozens of volunteers magic mushrooms, and today, those volunteers are still feeling the effects. The whole Johns Hopkins study seems just so hippy-dippy 60s. It brings to mind Timothy Leary, the man who first widely touted the alleged magic in this tiny mushroom.
Well, I was brought to Harvard in 1960, because I was one of the leading researchers on communication between people, interpersonal communication, where two minds are communicating. But we realized in the early 60s that that wasn't going to help you solve your problems or be able to direct your life, meeting minds this way. We needed some way to change the minds. And psychology back then did not know. We were looking for the magic bullet or the technique for helping people be able to change their minds, the way you change television channels, or the way you change programs on your computer. And a friend of mine from UC Berkeley came and said, Timothy, listen, there's something here that's been used for thousands of years. It's called the Mexican mushrooms, and they change your mind, and they've been used in many other forms throughout history. So I had the experience myself, and I learned more about the mind and the brain in 5 hours with these Mexican mushrooms than I had in 15 years as a psychologist. I discovered that I have a brain which is essentially a universe. Your brain is 100 billion neurons, and each neuron has the computing capacity of a Big Mac computer. There are 100 billion computers kicking around up there, and it's only recently that we've learned how to understand it. I couldn't have said that 20 years ago because we didn't have personal computers 20 years ago. We were just stumbling on the discovery of the brain, just like the people in Europe had to discover America in 1492. So hundreds of us, psychologists and professors and doctors, began exploring the brain, and we used these languages of taking a trip and come back and give us a report. So that's how and why we got started.